Hey everyone, before we get into the podcast for today, I'm going to talk about the sponsor very quickly for the video. It's called Naked Actives. It's very good skincare. They have all natural ingredients at an affordable price. You can go check them out in the description below. I put a little brief thing before I put the website, so go check them out. They're an awesome company for skincare products, and I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily Dose podcast. Today we have on Sean Vanderklis. He is a CBC radio host with the Superior Morning Show in Thunder Bay. Welcome, Sean. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I do appreciate you reaching out and taking the time.
This is awesome. I'm very excited. So for people that don't know, you started with iHeartRadio, I believe. I'm not sure if it was before that, but you had your own radio show, and it was called One Dish, One Mic, I believe. That's the show.
Yeah, correct. So we actually started off as a podcast. So back in 2016, what was happening is podcasts were really blowing up, and there was this gentleman by the name of I know he's going to kill me now. I'm forgetting his name, Trevor. He was my old producer. There was this gentleman by the name of Trevor who created a podcasting network, and the intent was he wanted to get a range of shows to kind of fill the void of podcasting that existed in the Niagara region. And he got shows that addressed issues that affect women. You got business like shows. You got news type shows, and they wanted to get a show that dealt with issues that were affecting Indigenous people, and that's where my show came in. I had no real background into podcasting, no real background into storytelling, anything of that nature. But they sent out an email to, sorry, my headphones keep coming out. But they sent out an email to me and who would eventually become my co-host, Carl Dockstader, to see if we'd be interested. We both said yes, and not knowing what we were getting ourselves into, we eventually went on to host as a podcast. From there, we got picked up by News Talk 610 at CKTV. And we were given our own show for an hour for the summer. We were told that it's a summer gig, we're not sure what's going to come up out of it. And from there, it went from 1 hour in the summer to 1 hour full time to 2 hours on a new time slot. So we started off on Sunday and we went to Saturday for 2 hours. And then that expanded from Saturday at 2 hours just in Niagara to Saturday in Windsor, London, Hamilton. We're working on Ottawa, Six Nations. So we went into 2 hours in different various markets across Southern Ontario. And yeah, that was the origins of One Dish, One Mic. That was 2016, so we're at 2021 now. About 5 years of that.
Wow, that's awesome. Did you when you were doing the 2 hours, was that a traveling thing, or was it could you just connect online? Like, how did that work out?
So we were in studio, yeah.
Okay.
So we were live in studio, and the way the Bell works is they have syndicated shows that run simultaneously across their platforms at a specific time. And they've never had a syndicated show that ran over the weekend. And so I guess we were one of the first ones to do so. So like Niagara, for instance, if you turn into News Talk 610 on the weekend, you're going to hear Matt Holmes give his daily show. You're going to hear Rod Mahood talk about sports. You're going to hear, I can't remember his name, Dave McMahon, I think, talking about the dogs and stuff like that.
Yep.
But when we went on, we were broadcasted. So we talked about our stuff, but then that was broadcast again simultaneously in Windsor, in London, in Six Nations. Yeah. So it's a pretty cool thing.
That is really cool. And I see, so I was listening to some of the stuff you have up there in Thunder Bay. Is it more so along the same lines of, like, you're just talking about Indigenous affairs and bringing light to, like, having a show up there that they might not have had before? Like, what brought you to CBC?
So that's funny. So Thunder Bay. So I'll answer the question and I'll backtrack a bit. So Thunder Bay, no, it's not specific to Indigenous things. So CBC itself has 30 morning shows across the country of Canada.
Okay.
And those morning shows, generally speaking, are similar in nature. So we cover current affairs, including politics, sports, stories that are unique to our area and to our region, so on and so forth. So they exist all across Canada. And so my show, Superior Morning, is one of those shows and has been in existence for about 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
We had a longtime host who made the decision to retire after serving in the seat of host for 20 years, but unfortunately ended up getting sick and ended up passing. So it's very, very tragic. But that made room for new people to come in and the show to kind of redefine itself, and that's where I came into place. My career with CBC was kind of a bit of a fluke, like to be honest. Between me, you, and your listeners, I was up one day drinking some beers, and I remember a friend of mine who was a reporter in Niagara sent me a list of fellowships and awards that were available, and not knowing anything about journalism, not knowing anything about radio shows or anything of that effect, I applied for this award for my partner and I, Carl Dockstader, and we ended up winning it. So it was a fellowship with CBC, and CBC has what's called the Indigenous unit. So that unit's based out of Winnipeg, and they cover issues that are affecting Indigenous people. Pardon me. So we would end up winning it in 2020, and part of that award was for us to go to Winnipeg for a month to learn from their producers and to kind of get our feet wet when it comes to journalism. But we applied as a journalism show and not necessarily just journalism. It's not just writing. So we had a bit of a hybrid in a sense that we got to work with CBC Indigenous, but then we also worked with CBC's flagship radio show. It's called Unreserved, and it focuses on issues, again, that are affecting Indigenous people. We spent our time between both of them. But COVID being COVID and ruining everything, unfortunately, we did not get to go. And we did the show online, so a hybrid. So we'd log in the computer every day, participate in their morning meetings, their team meetings, and then do some work with Unreserved. So from there, I ended up getting hired on to continue to work with CBC. So I worked with Unreserved as an associate producer, kind of working behind the scenes. So the role of the associate producer is to find stories, pitch those stories, chase down the stories, do pre-interviews, and then based on those interviews, develop scripts for our host. I participate in the actual interviews of that, so on and so forth. So I did that until about about May, and then from May they were looking for somebody to host National Indigenous Peoples Day in it's called the Ontario Smaller Markets. So that's Ottawa, London, Hamilton, Sudbury, Kitchener, Waterloo, Windsor, Thunder Bay. And so I was going to host a show provincially for the first time, and it was an Indigenous specific show on National Indigenous Peoples Day. So I hosted that show, and I did a fantastic. They told me I did a fantastic job.
You did.
And then what ended up happening is they encouraged me to apply for the Thunder Bay job. So I applied for that, and now here I am talking to you in minus 20-degree weather.
Are you up there right now, or are you back down in Niagara?
I'm up here right now. Yeah.
Okay. What's so one quite, like you said, it was kind of just a fluke. Did you ever have any like with your original show, did you ever have any like aspirations or dreams or goals towards being like a bigger broadcaster? Did you just kind of think it was going to be something that you just did, and like was there anything that kind of led you to receiving that opportunity? Or
my goal, once we started the show, my goal was always for us, Carl and I, to go national, to have our own national show, but have it in a way that we got to do it the way we wanted. One Dish One Mic was very fortunate that we were given complete creative control. So there's no rules, no restrictions. We could talk about what we wanted to talk about, lend an opinion if we needed to lend an opinion, and cover stories that were important to us. Now with CBC, that's not necessarily the case, because stories that are important to me as an Indigenous person aren't necessarily important to everyday people um, every single day, right? While
Mm,
Indigenous issues are important, I mean, we have to be mindful in the stories that we're telling, right? Because there's other issues too that need to be covered. So
mm,
working for CBC, that's kind of limited on my, at least my ability to cover all the stories that I wanted to cover. Um, so that's why I thought it would be important for us to maintain it in that way. But life is just funny, because you never know where you're going to end up. And Carl got a job working as the executive director. He's still in the Niagara region, at the Niagara Regional Native Center. I got a job. I got this job working with CBC, and and again, here I am right now. So my personal goal is to go provincial, national. Let's see what happens. There's a gentleman by the name of Duncan McHugh, and he's one of our national hosts, and he's Indigenous. I want to kind of follow in his footsteps. He's really paved the way for up and coming Indigenous hosts. So I guess that's my goal.
that's yeah, that's a great goal. I mean, and definitely I've noticed on my pursuit of my goals that the more you think about it, those opportunities kind of come to you. Like it might seem like a fluke, but if you were thinking about that, it it starts to kind of move towards you as you have that goal. And for younger people to see that, I know for me it was a little bit harder when I was coming out of school feeling like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but at the same time I knew what I wanted. This kind of leads me to my next question. Like, did you go to school for this, or was this kind of something that you followed an interest?
This was purely happenstance. I mean, I graduated school, uh, went to college, didn't know what I wanted to do in college, so I took a university college transfer program. And the goal was essentially to get me into school, and hopefully within that 1 to 2 years, I figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up. One of my downfalls in life is that I've always been a relatively good communicator, which sometimes it's going to sound bad. I don't have to work necessarily as hard because I'm able to communicate what I want.
Mhm.
And I perform really well in jobs. So while I was in school, I got offered a job. I took the job, ended up becoming a social worker, worked as a social worker for almost 10 years in various capacities. Um, and still not knowing what I wanted to do, I started looking at like the financial aspect of it, realizing that like social work is fun and all, helping people out is really fun and all, but like I'm not really getting ahead of myself, right? Getting too ahead. So I think, it's time for me to go back to school. And then I made the decision to take up human resources with the goal of getting into like a consulting. I was going to have my own consulting business, um, and hopefully make a little bit more money there. Um, and so while I was doing that, that's when One Dish One Mic started, and I completely 90-degree angle or 180-degree turn around, and now I'm working for CBC.
Yeah.
So that was never planned, was never a desire. But when the opportunity presented myself, like I just ran with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, then that kind of goes back with being a good communicator too. Like I've noticed on the shows that you have that voice that you're like, I don't know how to explain that, but the radio show host voice, like you're just you're certain in your words, is what I can say. Like you have that conviction of how you speak. And again, having that communication skills, that's very important. Like for anybody in any field, being a good communicator and a very good listener is very important. And I'm sure, like you said, it led you to different opportunities. Um, did those, like getting into these new opportunities, did you have any big bumps in the road? Like, did you have any huge learning experiences that you had to get through going into such a new field as a broadcaster?
Oh, 100%, because we went in not knowing, like my knowledge of podcasts were that they existed. and
Mhm.
that was that. And then we went in with the expectation, because podcasting, like as you probably know, is very hands-on. You have to know how to properly record. You have to know where, like, mic placement. You need to know um, the recording program that you're going to use, right? Um, and we had nothing, no experience at all.
Hmm.
We had no clue how to frame a story, how to get the story out that we wanted, interview prep. Like we kind of went in blind. And the first couple episodes that we did were just kind of us ranting for the sake of ranting, no preparation at all. Made for very good listening content, but like structure wise, format wise, it was virtually non-existent, right? Um, so that was a huge learning curve. And then when we went, so after that, I took a job with the Niagara Falls Review as the education reporter. Again, purely luck. And I've never like I'm a pretty good writer. I've always been a decent writer, but working with Niagara Falls, I've never written a news article before in my life. Like, and then there's a formula there that you have that trained eye, you don't know what to look for. And eventually, I learned it. But again, I feel like for the last 5 years, all I've been doing, last 6 years, all I've been doing is learning. Because there's so much to learn to help you become a better storyteller, to highlight the issues that are important to you. So CBC is very much the same. Like while journalism is important, while a journalism degree is important, with CBC they have so many internal processes that I don't know that it's the most important thing to have, because you're going to be learning a lot of things. You're going to be learning to do a lot of things to their standard, which might not necessarily be taught via school.
Okay. And what does that mean? Like to their standard, like it's more so in the field kind of knowledge and you gain as you go?
Exactly. There's a lot of corporate memory that happens that exists at CBC, right? Some of the terminology of the things that we do is based on just the length of their time telling stories, as opposed to in the field. Like so, when I say writing a green is something that's uniquely CBC, and you would never hear that in any other company other than CBC. And what that means is we're writing a script. But the reason it's called a green is because back in the day it was written on green paper, right?
Okay.
And these are things that just happen to be CBC spoken language. But again, you wouldn't learn that in the field itself. Um, so there's things like that. The program that we use a program called Dalit for sound engineering and stuff like that. And Dalit was designed for CBC. Like we started up with them back in the day, and we continued to be with them, and they would make modifications to the program based on our needs. And you don't hear that a lot of times, right? So the program exists in its current fashion because of the work that's happened at CBC.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, and that's something that for me, I had a pretty big fear, feeling like I had to do and know everything when I came out of high school, and feeling like you need to know everything in order to have the job. And that's like every field, you're going to learn as you go. And that's a great thing that people can hear too, because as you get in there, there's people and resources that are always there to help. Is there anyone that you kind of look up to, or well, you talked about the one gentleman, but have you noticed anyone like a mentor, anyone that's kind of led you and you take advice from regularly to grow?
I mean, multiple facets really, because my job is I'm like multi-dimensional. So like when it comes to like pure journalism, there's a reporter out of the Niagara region by the name of Grant LaFleche. He's one of my go-to guys. He's been in the game for a very long time. He's done school. He's done the whole process in a very traditionalist way. And me not coming from that traditional journalism background, I relied heavily on him. So when I worked for the Niagara Falls Review, I'd get him to vet my stories before I'd submit them off, and then them get vetted by our editors. So he's one of the guys that I would look up to. Duncan McHugh, who works for CBC, is a radio show host. I mean, I don't necessarily see him as a mentor because we don't work that closely together, but he's somebody that I really admire. There's another gentleman by the name of Wabagija Grice. I want to say that he was the first Indigenous radio show host in the province of Ontario. So he hosted Up North, which was run out of Sudbury but broadcast to all of northwestern Ontario. And I'm the first Indigenous morning show host. So my show runs out of northwestern Ontario, and so not including Sudbury. So Wabakisha Christ is one of the first people I looked up to, and I called on a couple of times to help me get my head around things too, because CBC is a huge monster, right? It really is. There's thousands of employees, hundreds of departments. It's hard to wrap your head around how big CBC truly is. Um, Carl Doxier too, being my former co-host, like he was my guy, right? Like we'd have story ideas, we'd pitch them to each other, and we develop them together. And with journalism now, you're not necessarily afforded that opportunity because everything you're doing on your own, right? So with Carl, him and I would bounce these ideas off of each other and play off of each other, and we'd grow together. And he's still running One Dish One Mic. It still airs in Niagara Saturdays 10 to 12. Should your listeners want to subscribe, feel free to do so. So yeah, people like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely having those people to look up to. Well, I mean, congratulations, first of all, of being the first Indigenous morning show. That's awesome. I didn't know, but it's having those people to go off of before is a great thing. And like you said, I mean, you're doing a lot on your own, but having someone that you can look off of and have ideas to bounce off of is fairly needed sometimes, because you can only get so far with your own by your own means, and then you're going to need someone that has that specific knowledge. So what is a day-to-day, like what does day-to-day look like for you with CBC, like when you're doing the journalism and writing the scripts and doing the show? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, it varies for the most part. I mean, my day starts the same every day, and then in the later parts of the day, it changes depending on what's on the agenda. But I get up around 4:15 in the morning, at work for 5 a.m. reviewing the show notes that we have. So the stories that we tell, there's a team who works behind me to help produce a daily show. So there's about 4 or 5 people who are there, and sometimes our stories that we are told are secured through OSS, so it's secured through like our Ontario station. So we have an Ontario team that chases everything on Ontario. Then we have a syndicated show which is Canada wide, so they chase everything throughout the country of Canada. So by the time the show is ready to go, we don't get every script until like 9 p.m. at night. So I get in early, review the scripts, kind of make them sound to the way I speak, and that's one of the hardest things that I didn't realize how hard it was. Is when people write, they write for themselves, right? So when you go to read a script, sometimes it doesn't flow as naturally as you'd like it to, because it wasn't written for you; it was written for them, right?
Yeah.
So going in at 4, going in at 5, I spend that hour trying to rewrite or rejig to my natural speaking ability. Sorry, my phone's going off. And then 5:57, I'm on the air for 2 minutes. I preview what's coming up in the show. Talk about the weather for a bit. 6:10, we're live. We're live from 6 until 8:37. And then at 8:37, that's pretty much that for the show itself. And then from 8 to 9, depending. Sometimes I have pre-interviews that pre-interviews that need to happen, and usually they'll happen in that time frame. So if we're interviewing somebody for tomorrow's show, it'll happen within a 10-minute period. 9:30, I have a team meeting. So we all the reporters and journalists come together. We meet to talk about what we're pursuing for that day. Sometimes I'll be pitching ideas of things that I want to do. Other times I'm sitting there just waiting for people to tell me what to do, because they have story ideas that they need to get told too. So, and yeah, that's that until about 1 o'clock. So within that time frame, I could be either making phone calls, sending off emails, writing scripts, or I could be behind the mic. Today I went off-site. Sorry, there was a hockey tournament, and it's the first time that this hockey tournament's taken place since 2019, pre-COVID. So then the angle of the story was, what is it like for you to be back playing sports given the 2-year hiatus? Yeah. So I got to go into the field and tell those stories from a bunch of grade 9s or grade 10s.
That's pretty cool. I mean, the restrictions being lifted is definitely, it almost feels surreal a little bit to me, like to have this back. Is there is it in studio now, or is it
So I have to be in studio. So when COVID happened, all of the reporters had to work from home. But being the show host, if there's pre-tapes or anything like that, our technology exists at the studio. So it'll be myself. I have a newswoman who reads the news. I have an associate producer who's also our computer technician. So us three had to be in studio. So and for all of Canada, those three people were in studio if that station had a morning show program. If not, all journalists were working from home. So
wow.
yeah.
So I'm in acting, and there was one thing that I related to what you said about the scripts because I've been doing a lot of background, and I remember seeing this one scene where the lady, she said something about her script, and she said, I don't relate to how this is being said, and she just changed how it's said. So I kind of thought that was funny, how she was like, the delivery doesn't sound right to who she is, and that's kind of related to you. But what I was going with this acting thing is there a lot of people behind the scenes that, like, everyone always says movies take so many people that you don't really realize? Is that kind of the same for like the radio show? And like, is there a ton of people that you don't actually see that go behind making that happen?
Yeah, 100%. So for Superior Morning itself, there's me as your radio show host, and then I have an AP tech guy who's there who um, takes care of all the technology aspects of the show while the show's running, but then also has his own column that we run on our show. So he's chasing for that. We have a newswoman who tells the news multiple times throughout the show, but also tells stories above and beyond that too. I have another lady who does just general chases for the show. So her job is just to come up with segments of things that we could do on the show. And I have a producer who makes sure that everything times out nicely. CBC is really big into formatics. So everything is about timing, everything is about length and making it all come together perfectly. So that's her job, is to putting everything together. And I have an executive producer who I mean, he's executive producer. So hopefully he's not listening, but they don't really do much. They just sit there and get to put an EP on the back of the name. But a lot of the basis of them having that job is the work that they put in ahead of time, right? So for him to be an executive producer means he put his time
in. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, they're the top dogs in the sense that they're getting it all started.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it is really cool how you see the short, like, hour, 2-3 hour movie or broadcast, and it's just you, or it's just the actor, and it's like everyone's watching it. This is great. But then when you see all the moving pieces behind it and everyone coming together, it really is, it's awesome. Like the whole team.
If I had to like quantify it in dollars, our show is probably around $400,000 plus a year to make. $400,000 to $500,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do they because you were talking, I heard a few of them, and you were like doing off-site things. Do they do that often, or is it just kind of when that story comes up, and do they ship you there, or do you have to drive, or?
Yeah, so I mean, there's because of COVID, rules have changed and so on and so forth. But the goal is for me to really be out in the community. Like, people need to see me, right? Radio in the north is a lot different than radio in the south. People turn on for the sake of turning on. They keep on all day, and it's a big part of their lives. People up here, and like coming out from Niagara, like I never listened to the radio. Like, even having a radio show, I would barely listen to talk radio. It just wasn't my thing. But that's not the case here in the north. Everybody seems to listen. So it means difference, and you have to be visible in the community. If people don't see you in the community, then they're not going to trust you to tell the stories that you want to tell, right? So the goal is for me to be in the community, covering such a wide area that we cover. Yeah, I'll be taking plane rides to like Sandy Lake, to different parts of northern Ontario that are only accessible by plane or ice road in the winter. So I'm excited for that.
But yeah, that's really cool. Where have you been so far that you could
Just
say was
just
notable?
just driving, yeah, just driving distance around. So I think that Nipigon is about an hour away. Red Rock is about 5 minutes north of Nipigon, so around there. And then just parts of those, just, just parts of CBC itself, or it's not CBC, Thunder Bay itself too.
Was it
So, sorry.
is this the first time you've been, like when you went up there, was that the first time you went to Thunder Bay, or had you been there previously?
So I've been to Thunder Bay previously. One of my first times flying was to Thunder Bay. I was like 16 years old. I came up here for a youth program, and I used to sit on a board of directors. And our board of directors met in Thunder Bay for one of our annual general meetings. So yeah, I've been here like a handful of times.
That's pretty cool. I saw the one, I listened to the one where you were doing a tree cutting, like a Christmas tree cutting. There was like in the forest or something. It was a tradition. I guess that must have been with the previous host, because I heard they were saying that was your first time and they used to do that. Something like that.
Yeah, so that gentleman, so his name is Gord Ellis. He's kind of like our outdoorsy guy. So anything to do with outdoors, he is a guy. He's worked with CBC for 30 years. So the tradition was he would take the host out cutting trees. Because of COVID, that hasn't happened, and this was the first time they've done it in like 4 or 5 years. So he took me out, and it was cool. We drove for about an hour, and it was my first real experience in like northwestern Ontario snow and
Yeah.
northwestern Ontario winter, and it's completely different because temperatures get down to like -40 here. Like if I were to look outside right now, our snow piles are like 10 feet tall. Like we get so much snow in northwestern Ontario and specifically Thunder Bay that an actual concern is where do we put this snow, right? Because 10 feet tall piles at the end of your road are a distraction for driving, could fall on the road, so on and so forth. So this is an actual concern. Is we get too much snow, where do we put it?
Yeah, that actually crossed my mind when we had a, I'm sure you know, but the pretty decent snowfall here. I thought about the same
Yeah.
thing. When they're going down a big road, where do they put it? And to the extent of 10 feet, that's pretty. I
It's
actually can't
great.
even imagine.
It's crazy because like imagine a bus stop that exists, an enclosed bus stop. Now this bus stop is covered in snow, and it's like its own little lair, its own little fortress, if you will. So, like Thunder Bay has really bad homeless population and has a really bad, a houseless population, and this has a really bad addictions issues that exist. So these people make these bus stops their homes essentially, because snow is a natural insulator, so it keeps it warm. But then you add the glass ceiling to the effect, and all of a sudden, like you're kind of living a life with this bus shelter and this snow that's around you, right? It's stopping all the elements from reaching you. So it's the dynamics between the natural environment and people here are pretty crazy. But yeah.
Is it? Oh, do you find it's very, because it is so up north? It's like outdoors oriented, or like is it Thunder Bay? I've never been. So is it like a big city that is surrounded by a wilderness, or is it like
Yeah,
a smaller city?
it's a big city in the sense that it's big. It's twice the size of Niagara Falls population wise. It's about 110,000, but it's the last city in northern Ontario before you get into these super tiny towns. So like this is the last big hurrah. So we have everything that a normal, like not normal, but a major sized city would have. Um, but also keeping in mind that people come here for work, right? People come here. The majority of the people that you see here on a regular basis are people who are transient nature, so truck drivers. People are coming here for a shift. People are coming here from remote Indigenous communities. Like there's this whole transient portion of the population that don't necessarily call Thunder Bay home, but it's a stopping point in their life, right? So Thunder Bay itself is very unique in that regard because one of my producers was in a band, and he described it as people leave the moment they finish high school, figure out what they want to do with their lives, maybe get some experience, and then come back 15 years later. And that seems to be the big population. It seems to represent the majority of the population. So, which is very weird to have a town that's not comprised of its like residents. Do you know what I mean? It's a town. Well, I guess you know that living in the Are you from Niagara Falls?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, living in Niagara Falls, where the population goes up to about 1 million in the summertime, right? These people aren't from your town. They're not invested in your town. Sometimes you question, do they care about your town, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very unique dynamic to have. But yeah, it's fun to watch. If you're a people watcher, come to Thunder Bay.
Yeah. Okay. That is pretty interesting. I guess it would kind of be like a vacation, like places like or I'm just throwing it out there, but like those beach, like Wasaga Beach, if you live there, or Fort Erie, kind of like they had those vacation homes. I probably not to the extent, but
Yeah.
that is that's something I never really thought of. What is it like living up there and being so distant from your family, because you're probably there a couple months at a time, right? Was that
Yeah.
quite an adjustment, or?
Oh yeah, it's horrible. Like as an Indigenous land, like I'm very, very family oriented, very community oriented. Like I thrive on being with people I consider family and being within my community. Like I put a lot of work and a lot of effort into my community. So being removed from that environment, it takes a lot to get used to. I don't even, to be honest, like I don't even know that I've overcome it yet. Especially in COVID too, because everything's shut down, everything is closed. So there's not really anywhere to go. So some days I'll find myself going to work and then coming home, taking a nap, making dinner, going to bed, right? So it's been hard trying to adapt to that. But we'll see what happens in the summer. Restrictions seem to be opening up a bit. Northwestern Ontario, the summer is the ideal season. Like apparently it doesn't get dark into here until like 11 o'clock at night. Wow. And the sun rises at 5 o'clock, everybody's telling me. So like that's, what is that, 5 plus 6, it's like 17 hours. Yeah, 16 hours, 17 hours of sunlight that's going to exist. So it'll make for an interesting time.
Mm-hmm. Have they come up to visit you, or do you mostly come back?
Yeah, I come back. I try to come back every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, depending. Yeah, so I'll come back for the weekend. Speaking of family, my son's messaging me right now. Yeah, so I'll try to come back every 3 weeks, and we'll kind of reconnect and do all the fun things that's kind of missing out on now. So it's good. It's working right now. The thing is like, this is such a tremendous opportunity that like you can only be the first once in your life, and for me not to take it, but like, unfortunately there's sacrifices that come along with that. So hoping it works out. We'll figure it out. Like I'm not necessarily going to sit here and say that Thunder Bay is this is going to be my forever job. I'm hoping like this is a jump off to other jobs where I can either, let's say, work from Toronto or work from home or work from Ottawa, right? Somewhere that's more reasonable for me to work from.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, that kind of leads back to your original podcast, how it kind of led to one thing, and now you being here, it's this great opportunity will lead you in directions you can't even fathom at the moment. Do you need to take a, like, was it a call? No. Okay.
No, it's just my son sending me TikToks.
Okay. Yeah. So that I was kind of leading that into like people that go away to school or people that go away for a job. Would there be anything that you found so far that's helped you like stay connected with your family, or that's helped you kind of like merge that gap a little bit? That
I'm a big fan. Like I think I've hacked the secrets to life. And it's really about communication. It is. If you think about all the problems that exist in the world, usually it boils down to a lack of communication or a misunderstanding or something to that effect. And I think communication can overcome the majority of the problems that seem to exist. So if you find yourself in a foreign environment, the best thing you can do is communicate how you're feeling to relevant people, right? So if it's your boss, for instance, let them know like I'm feeling slightly isolated. This is a new experience for me, right? Chances are you're not the only person who's feeling that. chances are you're not the only person who has felt that, and chances are they're not going to have to come up with a solution that is uniquely to your issue because they've already dealt with this, right? The other thing too is talking to your family. Like if you need to talk to them, talk to them. Being so close with my family, like my mom and I, we talk every single day. Like she literally messages me every single day. My kids and I, we talk every single day. And I go from never using the phone living in Niagara only to Google search or Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever, to being on it more times now than ever. So just communicate, right? It's really that. I think the success is your success is only going to your success is dependent upon your mental health. And if you're feeling isolated and you're feeling alone, I mean that's not going to lead to a positive or lead to proper mental health for you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good point. And having that communication and being able to express, I said this in a video on my channel actually, like being able to let out what you're feeling to show that you're actually not alone. And that really that does help a lot because you feel alone sometimes, but other times when you share it, you see that there's plenty of people that have gone through or are going through that same experience. So
It's funny, like it's funny. Humans are so have such a high opinion of themselves that they think that what they're going through is the first time that this has ever happened in the world, and it's only ever happened to them,
Mhm.
and they're so special that it's going to take them to solve this problem. When in reality, I mean, loneliness has existed forever, right?
Mhm.
Like what separates us between what separates humans from animals is our ability to communicate. Our success as a human race has been solely based on our communication levels. So for
Mhm.
us not to communicate, I mean, it's counterintuitive and counterproductive to, I guess, what our bodies have been designed to do. And I mean, I like you think it's just you that's going through this. It's not. It's everybody, right?
Mhm.
Just take that time, open up, talk to your boss, right? If you have a union, reach out to your union, see if there's an employment assistance program out there. If there's somebody new town, reach out to them. Like how you like the job, right? And the other
Mhm.
thing too is just being friendly. Um, how's it going, right? The simple things of life is just how are you doing? Asking that to somebody and then responding truthfully to it, not just as simple as, oh, I'm okay. How are you doing, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if you have something you need to get off your chest, yeah, take advantage of the people because we think that people don't have time, or we think that people don't care, and that's not. I find that that is not the case for most time. Most times, sometimes there's just people who don't care, or sometimes the time you reach out isn't the most opportune time because of life's pressures. But for the most part, people will make room for you to open up. So.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I did hear a quote, or not a quote. I think it was from Steve Jobs. He said, "You'll be surprised. Like you just need to ask, and you will receive." Basically, like he was just saying, you just need to ask, and you'll be surprised how many people will be willing to sit down and talk, whether it be someone that you just walk by or someone that you actually want to get information from, whether that pertains to what you're doing. And you will be surprised again, relating back to you feeling alone. No, you're never alone because there's people that will be helping you and you'll be surprised that they will help you.
Yeah.
Um, is there what is the community like up there? Is it very, because I know you said you're very family oriented. Is there a sense of community in Thunder Bay, or is it kind of everyone does their own thing?
It's twofold. So historically, Thunder Bay was two towns that were fierce competitors with one another. So Thunder Bay is comprised of uh, Port Arthur and Fort William, and they hated each other up until the 1970s. And then in the 1970s, they amalgamated to become Thunder Bay. And the way the town is designed, the way Thunder Bay is designed, is very much like two towns, two cities.
Hmm.
We have two downtown cores. We have two of everything almost. And the gentrification that exists in Thunder Bay is along a road that connects these towns together. So that's where you get the Walmarts, and you get the Boston Pizzas and the KFC, like all these newer style concepts of business live on that road. Whereas the other parts of the town, where you get the uniqueness of something that is uniquely Thunder Bay, something that's uniquely Fort William, they exist on the outside, right? So I describe Thunder Bay like a sea. It looks like a sea, and that road from the bottom curve to the top curve is that a road that connects the cities, and the cities live in the top parts of that sea, top and bottom parts of that sea. But the other thing too is like Thunder Bay is a very tough place to live in. It is the murder capital of Canada, and has been so like the last 4 or 6 times, four of the last 6 years. It is there's a huge issue with drugs that exist up here. So our crime rate is higher than the national average. Our poverty rate is higher than national average. Substance abuse issues are very prevalent in the city. And unfortunately, racism plays a huge part. Like I've never experienced so much blatant, in your face racism as I have living in Thunder Bay. It's just it's not a safe place for Indigenous people. And especially if you're somebody like myself who is rather outspoken when it comes to anti-Indigenous racism. Being in this environment, this sounds horrible, but like you don't know your place, right? You don't know when you can bark or when you have to fight. And that's been one of my toughest things, is learning when to speak up and when not to speak up. Because if I sit here and fight everybody who has a racist opinion or does something racist, then I'm never going to get to live my life. It's really like I'll be at the grocery store for like an hour just because I got followed, right? Where there's more productive things that I can do. And it's unfortunate that like I find myself in this position. Other Indigenous people find themselves in this position where they just have to kind of suck it up. But yeah, I mean that's kind of it. Like coming up here, my goal was to bring my kids up here, knowing that Thunder Bay was racist. But I don't know that I would, because a lot of the things that I've instilled in my kids is about pride and cultural pride, and I don't want them to have to second guess themselves about that, right? I want them to not, because growing up, we were not raised Indigenous, right? Colonization really messed up our family, and that cultural pride didn't exist, and it took some years to look for, took some years to kind of master, and took some years to kind of get. And I'm 35 to the point where I'm just kind of getting around to it. Whereas my son, he's known that, and he's had that ever since he could walk and talk, right? So I think it would do a disservice to him as a person if he were to live up here in Thunder Bay.
Yeah, I briefly remember. I think Cassidy told me about that. How it was just a different. How you were saying it was just different completely up there. And my next question was in the middle of that, is there any like reserves up there, or is there much of an Indigenous population? Like why that seems to me, I don't, that's just how it's so blatant. That seems like it's, I thought there was a lot of, I'm not sure how to word what I'm trying to say, but is there like a big Indigenous population? Because I thought it would be like up north more, there was more reserves and more like of an Indigenous population.
Yeah, exactly. There is a significant amount of reserves. So the population of the Indigenous community here in Thunder Bay, officially on the census, is around 15 to 20%. But that doesn't take into account so many other factors that bring Indigenous people in here. So simply because you don't live here year round out doesn't mean you don't live here. So Thunder Bay, being the largest urban center in the north, it houses a lot of Indigenous people who are coming from these far north remote communities for school. So they'll come here and they'll be billeted here, and they'll go to school here. So it doesn't take into account that. It doesn't take into account all the Indigenous agencies that are based at the Thunder Bay. So if you want to work in politics in Canada, you go to Ottawa, right? If you want to work in sports, maybe you go to Toronto or Vancouver, right? You go to these urban centers, and it doesn't take into account like those types of agencies. The other thing too is that is the nature of who calls Thunder Bay home, right? When I was talking earlier about people being transients in nature, I mean, you take care of things that you feel ownership of, right? Like if it's your car, you're going to clean your car, you're going to wash your car, you're going to do all these things. But if it's not your car, I mean, there's other people to do that. You rent a car. This is why I paid for insurance, right? This is why I spent all this money, is so I don't have to do these things. And that's probably a horrible analogy, but that's just how people feel about some of the Indigenous people out here, is that they just don't care, right? And historically, Indigenous people have been viewed as less than, and have been treated as less than, and that's that's very much the same here. Like living in my apartment building, like I've been asked 6 or 7 times, like, why are you here? How did you get in here? As if a man like myself couldn't afford to live in an apartment building. That's not even that nice of an apartment building. Like it's decent, but by no means am I living in a bougie building. That's really cool, that people need to question whether or not I belong here. So
Mhm.
it's interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely, from being in Niagara, fairly sheltered as a kid. I would say, I mean, I never really, we learned about Indigenous culture very, very limited, but and seeing to that extent that that actually is blatantly around, just it kind of boggles my mind that that is still, or that's even a thing that goes on so often. Um, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, like all of the negatives, like if you think of all the negative stereotypes that have been associated with Indigenous people, so Indigenous people suffering from like homelessness and people suffering from addictions, alcoholism, those are all very prevalent. And those are also very in your face when it comes to Thunder Bay. The problem is people associate houselessness and alcoholism and substance abuse issues with problems that are uniquely Indigenous, and that's not the case, right? It's an issue here because poverty is the root cause to a lot of these issues, and who happens to be poor here is the Indigenous community. We go down to Niagara, where there's not a that significant amount of a population. It's not Indigenous people who are suffering from alcoholism and who are suffering from houselessness and substance abuse issues. Right there, for the most part, it's a mixed bag of people.
Mhm.
Probably more non-Indigenous people than Indigenous people. So people see that here, and people associate and attribute all of the wrongdoings in Thunder Bay to the Indigenous population, which has led to like systemic racism in our healthcare system, has led to systemic racism in our police forces, and it's made Thunder Bay a really tough place to live for Indigenous people. So
Hmm. Well, this kind of ties up, as we start to wrap up here, this kind of ties into a few things. So I was going to say, with all of this going on around you, and you have your strong base of who you are and all the values and everything of who Indigenous people really are, going along with your goal as well. So you know what you see and what you want, and all that outside noise is going to be there. Is there anything that you kind of, that you do, or is there anything that keeps you going, like when there's bumps in the road on your goal, or when there's people that are in your apartment building? Like, is there anything that you just keep going because you know what you instill, like for kids that are coming up and they might hit some bumps in the road towards their goal, or maybe experience, if they're Indigenous, experience the same things as you? Is there anything that you keep to like keep those shutters on and keep going?
well, it's really, for me, it's again, I'm a community focused and community oriented person, and I truly believe that it takes a concept, it takes a community to raise a child. And I think I'm obligated. I feel as if I'm obligated to give back and to contribute to that community. And as much as I see these negative impressions of Indigenous people, my job is to set a positive impression. My job is to be out there in the public, be telling the stories that traditionally haven't been told, to to be a positive contributing member of society, as cliched as that sounds. I think that's really my goal. Um, and having a community, when we talk about community often gets misunderstood, right? Like when living in Niagara Falls, would you say that you're part of the Niagara Falls community, or is there a certain ethnic group that exists? Do you go to you play baseball? Like there's a baseball community. Is there a soccer community? Is there an Italian community? Like community can be very, very much anything that you want it to be. But finding out what your community is I think the key to success in life. So yeah, giving back to my community. It's a long way of saying, yeah, giving back to my community is what keeps me focused, right? I really believe strength with the numbers. So the better I am, the better off our community will be.
Definitely, definitely. And I mean, I can keep tying this all back together, how just having people around, like you said, having people around that can keep going on that path, having the community of your family, the communication, and seeing that everyone is going through something similar and you can relate, having that makes a stronger community. And having people like you is people that are open to and willing to talk about what they experience and stand up for is what makes the right and positive things come through. So I as we wrap up here, I want to say thank you very much, Sean. It's been a great time having you on. And good luck to you up there, and as you continue going on. I'm excited for you and all the opportunities.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invite, and I will probably see you at in the summer sometime at an event.
Definitely.
All right.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone. Bye.